Hello and welcome to our afternoon edition of Arirang News. I'm Kwon Jang-ho and it's good to have you with us. Recent satellite photos have shown that North Korea has started to dismantle some of its nuclear facilities, but US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has revealed that their sources know that the regime is still producing nuclear fissile material. Despite this, he says the administration remains hopeful that Kim Jong-un will keep his promises of denuclearization and continue to pursue, quote, patient diplomacy. But then at the same time, he said he hoped the full denuclearization of North Korea will take place before the end of President Trump's first term in 2021, and possibly sooner. That also goes against Trump's own words, saying there is no timeline and no rush. Washington's mixed messages continue, and we'll discuss all that with a guest in the studio later. But first, we catch up on the latest headlines by turning to our news centre, where Devin Whiting is waiting for us. Devin?
Hi, Jang-ho. We'll start with the latest from Laos, where a dam collapsed earlier this week and left at least 26 dead and scores missing. South Korea is sending a team to help with rescue and relief efforts. Oh Soo-young reports.
South Korea has dispatched an emergency team to Laos to help with relief efforts there after a dam collapsed this week and caused extensive flooding. At least 26 people have died and thousands have been displaced. An advanced group of 7 workers from Korea Disaster Relief Team left for the Southeast Asian country on Thursday to help with rescue missions, medical aid and preventing epidemics. The dam that collapsed was part of a hydroelectric power complex in the southern province of Attapeu. Local media say as many as 13 nearby villages were flooded and 6,000 people were left homeless. The dam was built in part by a South Korean company, SK Engineering and Construction. And though the exact cause of the collapse is not yet clear, President Moon Jae-in on Wednesday called for emergency support for Laos. SK has said parts of the unfinished dam broke because of recent heavy rains. But while the investigation goes on, the company has promised active support for rescue missions and damage relief, dispatching a crisis team to the scene, as well as a helicopter and 11 boats. Korea Western Power Company, which was to operate the power plant upon completion, sent 2 boats and local medical staff. Media in Laos reported Wednesday that 2,800 people have been saved so far, but they still need to reach 3,000 others. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
This afternoon, President Moon Jae-in is chairing the first full meeting of the Presidential Council on Science and Technology. The slogan of today's meeting is People-Centered Science Technology is the future of innovative growth. The president urged those present to pursue innovation in R&D and to empower university research teams. It was attended by government officials in the science and tech fields, scholars, and industry leaders. Data from the Bank of Korea show the country's economic growth slowed down in the second quarter of the year. It looks like that was because of less business and construction investment and because the country's exports grew a lot less quickly. Kim Hae-sung reports.
South Korea's GDP grew in the second quarter by 0.7% from the previous quarter. The Bank of Korea says the country's GDP expanded by 398 trillion Korean won, or about $356 billion between April and June. It marks a slowdown from the first quarter's 1% rise, mainly due to weaker investment and export growth. Investment in business facilities contracted by 6.6% after growing over 3% the quarter before, mainly due to a cut in investment in both machinery and transportation equipment. Construction investment also turned to a negative 1.3% after gaining 1.8% in the first quarter. Growth in exports, a major driver of Korea's economy, also slowed to 0.8%, down from 4% in the first quarter. Imports fell 2.6% due to cuts in imports of machinery and transportation equipment. On the expenditure side, private consumption increased by 0.3% on quarter, logging the slowest growth in 6 quarters. Government consumption also grew by 0.3% on quarter. The second quarter growth figures mark a slight slowdown from the first quarter, but on year, the local economy grew by 2.9%. The Bank of Korea says second quarter growth is in line with its projections and that if the third quarter and fourth quarters have between 0.82 and 0.94% growth rates, Korea's GDP growth for 2018 will hit the bank's forecast of 2.9%. Kim Hae-sung, Arirang News.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is determined to get rid of his nuclear weapons, and he's taking serious steps to do it. That's according to Russia's ambassador to Pyongyang, Alexander Matsugora. Speaking to Russia's TASS news agency, the ambassador said Kim Jong-un's determination could lead to the regime denuclearizing in a relatively short period of time. He said North Korea's demolition of the Punggye nuclear test site was a very weighty step. Matsugora urged the U.S. to show North Korea that it's abandoning its hostile policies, and easing international sanctions, he claimed, could encourage Pyongyang to denuclearize more quickly. For 3 days in a row now, Kim Jong-un has been visiting sites related to his regime's economy, giving guidance in line with his policy shift towards economic development. Pyongyang's state-run Korean Central News Agency reported today that Kim visited factories producing foodstuffs and bags. He's reported to have looked around the production processes in a detailed manner and to have called on staff to make the products better to improve his people's quality of life. In recent weeks, Kim has been unusually busy giving field guidance, visiting construction sites, fish farms, food factories, and tree nurseries. The United States and the EU seem to be pulling back from the brink of a trade war. President Trump and the President of the European Commission have agreed to work towards zero tariffs, zero non-tariff barriers, and zero subsidies. Earlier this year, both sides had threatened to put massive tariffs on each other. Won Jung-hwan has this report.
U.S. President Donald Trump said Wednesday that he and European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker have agreed to work toward eliminating tariffs and barriers on trade, reducing trade tensions for now.
We agreed today, first of all, to work together towards zero tariffs, zero non-tariff barriers, and zero subsidies on non-auto industrial goods.
While declaring it as a very big day for free and fair trade, Trump said the EU agreed to import more U.S. soybeans and liquefied natural gas. The U.S. and the EU had been on course for a full-on trade war after Trump announced earlier this year tough new levies on steel and aluminum exports, and recently threatening a 25% tariff on European autos, with the EU reciprocating with tariffs against U.S. goods. But some of those issues seem to be resolved during Wednesday's meeting.
We also will resolve the steel and aluminum tariff issues, and we will resolve retaliatory tariffs. We have some tariffs that are retaliatory, and that will get resolved as part of what we're doing.
As both sides agreed to hold off on other tariffs for the time being, the meeting between Trump and Juncker could be the start of a better trade relationship between Europe and the United States. Won Jung-hwan, Arirang News.
It's been extraordinarily hot this month in Korea. We've been setting records here, actually, and so have many other countries. Our Kan Hyung-woo checked in with an expert to find out what might be causing this extreme heat.
This summer has been extremely hot across the Northern Hemisphere. The US, Canada, Algeria, Norway, and Japan have been seeing record-breaking temperatures for the month of July and extreme heat waves over the past 2 months. In Oman, there was one night in June when the lowest it got was 42.6 degrees Celsius, which is believed to be the highest low ever recorded. Experts say the record-breaking temperatures can be explained by rising concentrations of greenhouse gases, which are a major cause of global warming.
So the biggest reason for these extreme heat waves is climate change, which is a result of global warming. In climate change, the main effect is rising temperatures. The overall temperature of the Earth keeps going up, but the change gets bigger every year.
The World Meteorological Organization predicts that at this rate, the number of so-called heat wave days will double by 2020 and quadruple by 2040. This past June marked the second warmest month on record globally, but experts say the worst of the heat wave may soon be behind us as we approach August.
The heat waves are likely to continue, but we probably won't see the extreme temperatures of over 36 degrees Celsius we've had since last weekend. I think the heat waves in Korea will die down because the North Pacific anticyclone tends to shrink in early August.
The latest typhoon Chongdari is heading towards Japan and may affect the Korean peninsula, but the Korea Meteorological Administration says the storm's course could change. 강영우, Arirang News.
I'm Devin Whiting, and those are your news headlines at this hour.
America's top diplomat has revealed President Trump's goal on North Korea by saying that the U.S. plans to denuclearize the regime by the end of Trump's first term. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo also revealed that the U.S. is aware of North Korea's continuing nuclear program. Lee Ji-won has more.
The U.S. had been careful to avoid mentioning a specific timeline for North Korea's denuclearization, but U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has reiterated the Trump administration's previous hopes of achieving the regime's complete, verifiable, and irreversible denuclearization by the end of President Donald Trump's current term in office, which runs until January 2021, and hopes to reach that goal more quickly if possible. Secretary Pompeo made such comments at his briefing to the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee on North Korea on Wednesday. Pompeo said that although there is a long way to go, there has been progress and Washington plans to be patient.
We're engaged in patient diplomacy, but we will not let this drag out to no end. I emphasize this position in the productive discussions I had with Vice Chairman Kim Jong-un. President Trump remains upbeat about the prospects for North Korean denuclearization progress.
But despite the productive discussions and continued efforts to engage in talks with the North, Pompeo confirmed that the regime continues to make material for nuclear weapons.
Senator, I'm just trying to make sure I don't cross into classified information. I'm not trying to hesitate. Yes, they continue to produce vessel material.
When asked about whether North Korea was continuing to pursue submarine-launched ballistic missiles or whether its nuclear program is still advancing, Pompeo declined to answer, saying that public statements on the issue would not help a complex negotiation with a difficult adversary. At the hearing, Pompeo also reiterated the importance of North Korea's declaration of its nuclear capabilities, which is one of the key demands from Washington. He said that an initial declaration is vital for the U.S. to verify North Korea's full denuclearization. Lee Ji-won, Arirang News.
Now, to discuss these issues a bit further, joining me now is Professor Kim Hyun-wook from the Korea National Diplomatic Academy. Thank you for coming in today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So we've just seen Secretary of State Mike Pompeo at a Senate committee hearing revealing that North Korea is still producing nuclear fissile material. Perhaps not entirely surprising. But what's this mean right now? What's this show? Especially since North Korea has said they're willing to denuclearize and they're going to denuclearize, but they're still producing this material.
Yes, when Pompeo visited Pyongyang, there was tug of war between North Korea and the U.S. The U.S. requested that there should be a denuclearization moves by North Korea first before U.S. gives to North Korea some measures to guarantee its regime. North Korea wanted some kinds of measures to guarantee its regime, for example, declare the end of the Korean War, something like that, before North Korea takes some measures and moves to denuclearize itself. So they wanted the other partner to do something, first. I think now something, surprising happening is that North Korea is finally now dismantling the test sites of ICBMs, which I think would make some rooms for, the U.S. to do something in response to that. But, the Pompeo's remarks today is clearly the indicator that, U.S. still wants some serious denuclearization moves by North Korea, not some other subsidiary moves, which is like dismantling some test sites, something like that, which is not satisfactory to the level of denuclearization from the United States side. So I think this is clearly a signal from the United States the U.S. Objective of policy towards North Korea has not changed.
Pompeo also said that the objective is still the final, fully verifiable denuclearization of North Korea. But interestingly, he said that he hopes to achieve it by the end of President Trump's first term, which is in 2021, and possibly even sooner. Now, this goes against what Trump has said previously, saying there is no timeline for North Korea's nuclear dismantlement.
Sure.
What do you make of this conflicting remarks?
Yeah, I'm kind of, confused too. Whenever I hear something from the Trump government's staffs and Pompeo, always says something different. I mean, he said that there's no timeline. This time there's a timeline, which is the end of the first term of the Trump administration. Maybe this time he wants to make it clear that the firm objective of denuclearization of North Korea is CVID or FFVD, final and fully verifiable denuclearization, and also made it clear that there should be a rush in denuclearizing North Korea with aim of achieving CVID by the end of the first term of Trump government. So I think that now the atmosphere is that, the Kang Kyung-hwa, the foreign minister of South Korea, also mentioned the possibility of China joining the declaration of the end of Korean War, kind of aiming to have that declaration in August or September, which is very, earlier time than we expected. So now South Korea, North Korea, China is kind of ganged up together to persuade the U.S. to come up to the declaration, which is no good sign from the U.S. Side. So I think this time U.S. is very firm to keep its own, positions, to be very firm and tough to North Korea in denuclearization issue, I think.
Sure, as you say, the US wants denuclearization first. The North Korea are really pushing for, they're saying we want the declaration to end the Korean War first before they start to denuclearize. That's a conflict of timing and what comes first, the chicken or the egg kind of situation. Can that be reconciled? Does one side need to give in to the other?
It all depends upon what the U.S. Response is, what the U.S. attitude is. Now North Korea want it to be done quickly, sometime before midterm election of the United States, because North Korea knows that it's not easy for Trump to break out of the negotiation before the midterm election, which is a very important event for domestic political issues of the United States. So North Korea wants to get as much as possible from the United States, some kinds of measures of regime guarantees or possibly lifting sanctions from the United States. But the U.S. thinks that, U.S. also wants to get something from the North Korea, very serious denuclearization moves by North Korea before the midterm elections, because all these kinds of would be significant outcome that would boost the popularity of the Trump domestically. So we'll see how it goes. But it seems like there are still a tug of war. But the important thing is that South Korea finally, decided its position that okay, the declaration of the end of Korean War should become first before denuclearization. This declaration would be very important measures to induce denuclearization of North Korea. So South Korean position and South Korea, the U.S. Coordination would come up with some kind of outcome, I think.
Let's look more into that declaration to end the Korean War. Why is it that North Korea are so desperate to pursue that? And why is it bad for the U.S., for their position, from their side, that they agree to this?
Okay, declaration of the end of Korean War means that the current armistice situation is gone. I mean, now
because of course Korea is still technically still at war here.
Yeah, you seriously at the Korean War situation. But now South Korea-China relationship is okay. They have normalized their relationship. North and South Korea, fine. North Korea-China, fine. The only problematic relationship is North Korea and the U.S. So if the armistice is done, that means that North Korea and the U.S. would come into a normal states relationship, by which North Korea has some basis and leeway to ask the United States that, okay, we can normalize our relationship, we can build some kinds of liaison office in Pyongyang and Washington, D.C. And also, why do we need U.S. forces in South Korea? They should be withdrawn back to the United States. And also by removing this armistice situations, declaring the end of the Korean War, the U.S. loses its basis to use its military option to North Korea, which has been some options last year when North Korea was developing a lot of weapon systems. Trump was seriously considering some military options to North Korea. So all these kind of things is something that North Korea thinks that, okay, now North Korea at least legally safe from possible military and pressure by the United States, which I think would be very significant regime survival or regime safety measures from the North Korean stance and perspective.
So a lot of reasons why US wouldn't want this, but at the same time right now, North Korea are starting to show some sort of signs that they're willing to denuclearize. There are some nuclear facilities that they're starting to dismantle. Possibly Friday, they're going to return the remains of US soldiers that were killed in the Korean War. All these kind of signs, that must put pressure on the US to give in to some of North Korea's demands.
Yes, I think from the international community's perspective, these are very good signals that North Korea is keeping what it promised at the summit meeting. Even South Korean government mentioned that this is a very good signals. North Korea is keeping its promises. Okay, let's look at very big picture. Future not maiden nuclear capabilities, the capability that has been already made. North Korea is, destroying all these sites, test sites, which means that North Korea would not make nuclear weapons and ICBMs anymore, which means that the U.S. would not be threatened by the ICBM of North Korea anymore. This is very good signal. But the U.S. wants is that, okay, just let's begin denuclearizing and dismantling processes of what you have already, what North Korea have already. That's something that is focus of the U.S. policy towards North Korea. So, so far the U.S. is very firm. Its purpose and objective is CVID. But as I have mentioned, now China is joining, the South Korea and North Korea, 3 countries trying to persuade the U.S. to come up to the declaration first before North Korean denuclearization moves. So we'll see how it goes. I mean, September is a very important month. There is a UN General Assembly. Also, the September 9th is North Korean ceremony anniversary of its regime establishment. So let's see what happens in August or September.
You talk about China. So right now, the Korean War armistice, China is one of the signatories on it, along with the US representing the UN forces, as well as North Korea. Interestingly, South Korea is not involved in that, actually. But for this means, if there's going to be a declaration to end the Korean War, won't China need to be involved? Well, how much does China need to be involved? And why would China want to get involved?
There are lot of rumors why China was excluded the first time, and now China is joining the partners of declaration. Good thing is that if U.S., China, North and South Korea come together first to discuss the end of Korean War declaration, which possibly would lead to the peace treaty, a lot of issues would be debated forever. I mean, the U.S. and China, they definitely have contrasting views about the U.S. forces in Korea. China definitely would request U.S. forces should be withdrawn back to the United States. That kind of issue would, drag on and all, takes a lot of time. So I think that's why China should be excluded from the first time for a more effectiveness in making declaration and make the peace treaty, in a fast-track way. But I think, also there was some arguments that the army, Chinese army that have participated in the Korean War was not People's Liberation Army, but People's Support Army, not a regular army. So that means that the Chinese army was not a regular army, which means that China is not an official participant in the Korean War. That's why China should be excluded. A lot of arguments are there. But I think at this juncture, China requested very strongly to North Korea that China should be participant. And I think that position South Korea accepted because South Korea needs Chinese support to persuade the United States position, I think.
And South Korea as well, very briefly before we go, where does South Korea fit in all this? Because South Korea was not one of the signatories of the original armistice. How do they negotiate this situation?
South Korea definitely was not a signatory, but South Korea was victims and they fought together with the United States. The only reason South Korea was not a signatory is because South Korea did not want the Korean Peninsula divided, did not sign the armistice, did not want the Korean War to be stopped, just to continue to achieve the unified Korea. So that's why Syngman Rhee did not sign it. But that doesn't mean that South Korea is not a partner and participant of the Korean War.
Well, that's all we have time for. Thank you for coming in as usual, and look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you very much.
That concludes our show for now. I'll be back tomorrow, and do stay tuned to Arirang, though, for our later newscasts, where we'll bring you all the latest updates from Korea and around the world. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.